Well, it's great to be sitting here in Melbourne, up from Hobart, with Nobby and myself, with Stephen Wilson from Porcupine Tree. Welcome back to Australia.
Thank you very much. Good to be here.
How's it been since you were last in Australia? Did you get a chance to see around Australia much?
Well, unfortunately, the only two times we've been to Australia, we've really been doing a kind of whistle stop, show, fly home, and it's been the same this time. We did have a little bit of time off in Brisbane, so we went to see the koalas at the Koala Sanctuary, which was really, really amazing, actually. But I'm afraid to say that the full Australian experience will probably have to wait until another time.
We also have to congratulate you for Progressive Classic Rock Presents Prog magazine's voted you as Progressive Icon of 2009. Congratulations for that. How do you feel about that?
I don't know what that means, but I mean it's nice. It's nicer for my mum than it is for me. My mum likes those sorts of things. But yes, it's very flattering, obviously, yeah.
Well, a lot of the info that we read about Porcupine Tree, it's been a long evolution of the band over the last 20 years or so. How do you think, since Porcupine Tree's been in Australia last time, how have you evolved since Fear of a Blank Planet?
Well, I think there's a sense of wanting every album to somehow be distinct within the body of work, distinct from every other album. So this idea of repeating ourselves is not, is kind of anathema to us, and I think there's always a sense of trying to set a goal with each record. Now, the goal with this record was to create effectively an album-length piece of music, and to try to create a 55, I didn't have any idea how long it was going to be at the time, but certainly a 45-minute plus continuous musical journey. And that's very different to Fear of a Blank Planet, because Fear of a Blank Planet was really all about lyrics. It was all about the concept. I had the title, I had the lyrical ideas long before I'd written even a note of music. And I think that tended to give that album a very lyric-heavy feeling. It was a very difficult album to engage with without engaging with the lyrics and without the concept, I think. This album, not so much. I think The Incident is more about the musical journey. And so that is different, and that's allowed, I think, the band, the musicians in the band to have more space to allow their ideas to breathe and their musicianship to breathe. So it's become, I think, another in a sort of a string of albums which are all very distinct in their own right. I don't necessarily know if it's an evolution or just simply something different. I think there's a sense that the band are always looking with every album to reinvent themselves, just to keep it interesting for ourselves as much as anything. I've never really been interested in the idea of repeating myself. It gets boring, so some people prefer, there's always a sense that some people will prefer, a band to stay the way they are, and not to evolve. And I think Porcupine Tree fans have to get used to the fact that every time we make a record, we will have kind of shifted the goalposts and done something slightly different. So we say you have to expect the unexpected.
So I'm not sure how many shows you've done since the Incident tour began, but in all honesty, how much are you still after producing the albums yourself as well? Yeah. How much are you still enjoying actually getting up there and playing the album?
Last couple of nights I've really enjoyed it. I think there's been a break. The fact there's been a break has been a factor in that. I'll be the first to admit that after the 3 months that we did it between September and December, by the end I was kind of not going through the motions, but there's always this feeling that you want to give the audience that have paid the money or taken the trouble to come and see you a night they'll never forget, but you don't always feel up for it yourself. So that's where the kind of professionalism kicks in. It's okay, it's like a job, but I don't want to feel like it's a job. I want to feel really engaged with the music myself, and realistically, there's no way for it to be that way every single night. There simply isn't. You don't feel like going to work every day. It's the same for a band. We don't feel like going on stage every day. But I have to say, in the last couple of nights, we've had a couple of breaks. The Australian audiences are so terrific so vibey that it's been actually really a lot of fun to play the Incident.
That's because you don't come here enough.
Well, but sometimes that is a factor. We tour America a lot, we tour Europe a lot, and we've toured a lot of the same venues, for 10 years now, certainly the same cities. And so there is a sense of, predictability about it. But Australia was a surprise to us when we came here last year, or the year before last now. It was a surprise to us that we had any fans here at all. And we've had that a few times over the last few years. The first time we went to Mexico, first time we went to Russia, first time we went to India. We went to India just before Christmas. We were amazed and shocked to find people that had been listening to our music for sometimes for years, like you guys. And that is surprising, and it keeps... In a way, it keeps the job interesting for us, because one of the great things for me about the job that I do is I do get to see the world, and I get to travel as a professional, as a musician. I get to meet fans, I get to experience different cultures. I've made so many friends all over the world, and it's such a great way to see the world as a musician. The best way to see the world, really.
Tell us a bit about the Incident. Where did the seeds of the ideas for that album, where did they come from?
Well, as I said, the Incident for me was basically all about setting myself a goal, and the goal was, this time you're going to create a musical continuum, a musical journey. You're going to start at the beginning in much the same way that somebody would write a book. Now, the interesting thing about writing a book is it's very different to the way normally that musicians write music. Musicians or songwriters will write 10 songs, 12 songs or whatever, and then they'll find a way, a sequence that kind of sounds logical, and put them together on an album. That's not the way someone would write a book. A novelist starts at the beginning, I think most novelists anyway, start at the beginning and work through in a kind of narrative, linear way to the end. It's very unusual to do that musically, but this is what I wanted to do. I wanted to try and write a piece of music in the way that a novelist would write a novel. Start at chapter 1, and allow the ideas from chapter 1 to kind of flow through into chapter 2, etc., etc. And that was difficult because sometimes it's hard to keep that sense of flow and to not disappear up a cul-de-sac. And I've actually tried it a few times over the years and failed, and this was the first time I feel I've really succeeded in creating that musical novel, if you like. So, getting back to your question, I didn't have any idea of lyrics or subject matter at all. And I was quite happy about that to start with, because, as I say, in the past that's been very influential on the music, and I wanted the music this time to be somehow the most important thing. So I wrote about 30 minutes of music without having any idea at all what I wanted to write about. And then one evening I was driving home from the studio, having been working on some music, and I got stuck in a traffic jam on the motorway. All the cars slowed down. And I saw a sign above the road saying, "Police Incident." And it's probably the sort of thing that I'd seen, many, many times before, and not thought anything about it. But for whatever reason, that day, I started to dwell on this word, incident. What does that mean, incident? It's one of those words that actually doesn't tell you anything. And I really couldn't understand what this word was trying to tell me. And as I was driving through this traffic jam, I realised that this incident was a very serious car accident, presumably fatal car accident. And I started to think it's a very kind of cold, detached word for something very tragic and very horrific. And I suppose I was kind of struck by that at that moment I was struck by that paradox, that contradiction of the very cold, detached word, dispassionate word, incident, and the horror and the tragedy of what it referred to. And I started to notice how often that we use language like this, particularly in the media, how often the news and the media programs use words like incident to relate horrific things. And at the same time, they're quite capable of doing the opposite. For example, when Michael Jackson died, that wasn't an incident. That was the opposite. That was almost like we were expected to feel like a member of our own family had died. And I just thought, this is absurd. Absolutely absurd. It's the death of one pop star. and yet they can relate things like the death of 5,000 people in an earthquake or a tsunami as an incident, and we're expected to feel nothing, or at least we're not expected to feel anything, I should say. So it really, for me, it began to gestate this idea of how language is used, and how very often we rely on the media to tell us what we're supposed to feel empathy for, what we're supposed to feel in a way. And there's something, and at the same time that I understand why the world is like that, and that we cannot be walking around feeling empathy for every person in every tragic situation. At the same time I understand that, I also have to accept that there's something quite sick and twisted about that. And it's at the basis of, the human psyche, I suppose. So we're very selective about what we choose to empathise and relate to. So the incident really became about trying to taking these news stories and trying to put back, if you like, some of the empathy that I felt was missing from them, or that I was missing. And that very naturally led me on to writing about all sorts of other things, autobiographical and otherwise, and incidents in my own life that I think had changed the path of my life. Everything from the day I decided to become a professional musician to the first day I heard Pink Floyd, which was a life-changing moment, and just these little moments in my life. And sometimes they're moments that aren't significant in themselves. You'd think, maybe the first day at school would be a more significant thing. And when I actually look back at my life, it's not those things that are the most important to me. It's things that are almost insignificant that are the most crystallised in my mind. Just, like a summer afternoon spent gazing up at the clouds. It's forever in my memory. And yet my first day at school I have no memory of. So the memory, how the memory is quite selective, and how incidents are crystallised in our mind in sometimes quite strange and unexpected ways.
That brings me to the limited editions that you've been releasing over the years. Particularly starting with your solo album was a beautiful book that came out with that. So too with the incident. How important is that for you to have those limited editions released alongside the regular album?
Well, I think, as you know, I'm not a big fan of download culture, and although the whole thing about the iPods was kind of funny, it had a serious subtext, which was basically trying to get people to think about how music is presented now, and how things have changed since I fell in love with music. I mean, I fell in love with music right at the very end of the vinyl era. I was just young enough, I was born late enough just to kind of experience vinyl, just as it's sort of passing into CD. So the first records I was buying when I was a kid were still in, 12 by 12 gatefold sleeves with lyric sheets and inner bags, and there was something incredibly romantic and incredibly tactile about buying a record, even taking it out of the sleeve and putting it on the... And I know I'm old-fashioned in thinking that way, but at the same time I think I was also more fortunate than the current generation, for whom music has become little more than software. Some content they call it now. They don't even call it music. ISPs and iTunes and people like that could refer to music as content. What an ugly concept. Music is not content. Music is art. Music is something spiritual, emotional. If you call it content, then you have no understanding of why music is special. So I think the special packaging was almost a way of trying to get back to this idea of, if you consider music to be art, then you should present it as art. If you want people to feel it's something that they want to invest their money in and cherish and treasure, then you have to present it in a form that they will want to treasure. It's a piece of art, and good music is art. I can't divorce classic albums like Sgt. Pepper or Dark Side of the Moon or Led Zeppelin 4. In my mind, I cannot divorce the music from the artwork, and I think that enriches the music, and it makes me more passionate about the music and more emotionally involved in the music. And I think there's definitely now a kind of a need for musicians that really care about their art to get back to thinking about how they present it. Because at the end of the day, the crystal case CD is going to disappear. And to be fair, I'm not really bothered about it. I don't really care about it, because the crystal case CD was neither one thing nor the other, really. It didn't have that kind of romantic, tactile, artistic statement that the old vinyl gatefold sleeves had, and neither was it software. It was kind of somewhere in between. So I'm quite happy for that to disappear. But I think what that will do is put the onus back on musicians to... I mean, listen, I'm not suggesting that download culture is going to disappear, but I think there's definitely now a need for the two extremes, if you like, which is that you can make your music available as a cheap download, but for people who still care about packaging, I think the onus is on the musicians now to give them something really, really special. Something they'll be quite happy to pay $30, $40, $50 for, $100 for, No one thinks twice about spending thousands of dollars on a beautiful painting. Why should they complain about spending $100 on an incredibly packaged piece of art that someone spent a year of their life making? I spent a year of my life making this record. But it always makes me quite sad when people complain about the cost of... people complained about the cost of Insurgentes when it came out. It was £34. I was making nothing, I can tell you that. It was very expensive to make that. I thought it was beautiful, and people complained, And I think they stopped complaining once they saw it. They thought, probably didn't imagine they were going to get something that quite like what they did actually.
I think the silent majority overruled those guys, though, because it sold out pretty quickly.
It sold out very quickly, and as I say, I think when people saw it, I think they got it. I think it's when they were going online, they were saying that there's this book and you've got to pay this much money and it's expensive to ship, because they kind of just thought they were being ripped off. But when they actually saw it and appreciated the amount of time, effort and the inclination of the people that did it, I hope most people understood what I was trying to do with that. And so certainly carrying that through the incident now, and I think we're going to do something similar now for the next... We're doing a DVD now of the show we filmed last year, and we're going to do a similar package. A collection of, artworks for me. Whether you like the music or not, you have to appreciate there's something special with the art.
That brings me to the vinyl limited edition, which is a completely different package again.
Yeah.
And it's my personal favourite.
Right.
Tell us a bit about the way the incident was written specifically for vinyl.
Well, it's funny. It's one of those things. I think because of the era I grew up in, as I say, I first discovered music in the late 70s, and vinyl was still very much, it was the only format really. And ever since I started writing music, I have this tendency to think in terms of sides of vinyl. Even though I'm obviously now making music very much for a generation that, certainly through the 90s was all about CDs, and now it's about downloads, so this whole concept of sides of vinyl is irrelevant. But I can't stop myself thinking in that way. And I think there's something about great classic albums that come from the vinyl era. There's something about the two sides, or four sides if it was a double album, that made people think about the way they sequenced albums. And you get this sense of creating 20-minute sequences of music. So you get a great track to start side one, and you get a track that ends side one, and the track that opens side two. And I think it's no coincidence that so many classic albums come from the vinyl era, and relatively few classic albums have come post, in my opinion. But I think most people's opinion. Most classic albums come from... There's something about that 20-minute time frame, and then you turn over the side and you create another 20-minute continuum. It must be something to do with the sort of average attention span of people. I mean, I'm a believer that I think CDs kind of expanded the length of albums to the point where they were too long a lot of the time. 40 minutes seemed to be the perfect time to listen to a particular album, a particular kind of music. And the fact that it was split over two sides also seemed to help enhance the whole listening experience. So I still think in those terms. And even the incident was, I had this, even from the beginning, I knew exactly where side one was going to end and side two was going to open. And if you notice, side three opens with a recapitulation of the opening of side one, So all those things are, but it's just because I'm old and...
Stephen, I was going to ask you, I just noticed that you got your Tone Flow t-shirt on. You know, so are you still collecting vinyl albums yourself?
I do. I collect vinyl albums, and I also collect, I don't know if you've seen the Japanese vinyl replicas. Yeah, I collect those.
I'm here for you to sign.
Have you? Oh yeah, I love those.
That's provided you do.
Yeah, I love those things, because for me they're, in some ways, they're the best of both worlds, because you've got the convenience of CD, but you've still got that more tactile quality of vinyl. And of course, a lot of those records I remember buying on vinyl. So for me to buy a little replica now is like buying a little piece of my childhood but in digital, digitized form. So yeah, absolutely. I'm still a real geeky kind of collector kind of guy. I love it.
I also was going to ask you, you finished the Incident, now you're touring with the Incident, so where's Porcupine Tree, where's Stephen Wilson going to go from here? Is there going to be another Porcupine Tree album, or are you going to do a second solo album, or what are you planning to do?
Well, the second solo record is my next project, but there certainly will be another Porcupine Tree record, but I was very proud of my solo record. In some ways it's the truest record I've ever made, because it was, for the first time, it was like every aspect of my musical personality in one record. And I think there's been a tendency over the years for people to think that Porcupine Tree, Stephen Wilson equals Porcupine Tree equals, that's what I do. That's part of what I do, but I also like to make lots of other kinds of music too, and the solo project was kind of a way to bring all those strands together, and I definitely saw that as the first step in a continuing solo parallel to Porcupine Tree's solo career. So yes, second solo album is my next thing.
So finally, Stephen, there's a horde of Tasmanian fans. Final word for them?
Well, I hope we can make it down there and play. Do people go down there and play usually?
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, I shall be having words with our promoter then. If you say there's people down there that will come and see us play.
Well, I know you're a big krautrock fan. We just had Bunney Neumeier with us in the studio a couple of weeks ago, and Damo Suzuki's been on with us, and he goes down there quite regularly too. Really? So, yeah, so it's a little sort of untapped secret down there in Hobart. So it'd be good to catch up with you sometime.
Yeah, well,
down there.
Maybe next time I'll definitely mention to the promoter. Yeah.
Stephen Wilson, thank you very much.
My pleasure. Thanks, guys.